Let's speak now to Sahar Aziz, a distinguished professor of Rutgers University Law School. She's also a former senior advisor on civil rights at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. She joins us now live from New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us on Al Jazeera. What was the reasoning behind the judge's ruling, and how big a blow is this for Donald Trump, do you think?
Well, we need to remember that the reason why Mahmoud Khalil is in detention is only because he expressed his free speech rights, which are protected by the First Amendment, because that applies to anyone on U.S. soil, not just U.S. citizens, that he expressed his political beliefs and dissent against U.S. government policy, which specifically was supporting Israel during what he believed was a genocide in Gaza and supporting the U.S.'s refusal or opposing the U.S.'s refusal to impose a ceasefire. That is the heart of the case. And as a result, the Trump administration wants to deport him. He's lawfully here. He has never committed a crime. He's never been subjected to deportation orders. He is a highly successful graduate of Columbia University, a prestigious university. And so he has challenged his deportation, alleging, you're punishing me based on my First Amendment rights. I've done nothing illegal whatsoever. And so the case today was a federal judge, not an immigration judge, arguing or concluding that it's likely that Mahmoud Khalil will win that case, will win that challenge, that it is unlawful for him to be deported and it is unlawful for him to be detained. And the basic criteria, the two criteria for allowing him to at least be released on bail while this case proceeds, both in immigration court and in federal court, the two criteria is that he is not a flight risk and that he is not a danger to the community. He's not a flight risk because he has a U.S. American wife. He has a U.S. born son who was born while he was in jail in Louisiana, and he intends to start his life here. He's a legal permanent resident, and he is not a danger to the community because he's never committed a violent crime. He's not even accused of committing a violent crime in this case. All that he's done, that the U.S. government wants to punish him for, is express political dissent with U.S. foreign policy in Israel.
So will he definitely be released then, or is there a likelihood of something stopping that from happening? And what exactly does it mean for the case against him?
Well, in federal district court, there is the right to appeal to the losing party. In this case, it would be the government. So they will appeal it to the Third Circuit. And it's unlikely that the Third Circuit will overrule the federal district judge unless there is some new evidence that arises, but it is possible. And then they could also appeal it to the Supreme Court, but again, the Supreme Court doesn't take every case or accept every case where there's a request for it to review, and this doesn't seem like one that would, because it's really a procedural matter. So if the government loses on appeal, then Mahmoud Khalil will be released on bond, on bail, and he will proceed to challenge the deportation proceedings in immigration court, and he will also proceed to file his own civil suit alleging that his First Amendment rights were violated by virtue of his unlawful arrest and unlawful detention.
And can Donald Trump defy this ruling?
Well, it depends on whether he wants to defy the U.S. Constitution, but legally, the Trump administration must abide by court rulings, and they can appeal it. And once it gets to the last court, which is either the appellate court or the Supreme Court, then at least as a matter of law, they must adhere to the ruling. If they choose not to, then that is a major constitutional crisis, which will create havoc across the country, which isn't related to Mahmoud Khalil per se or his case. It is the problem of no judicial independence, no separation of powers. And so it would be very, very risky politically for him to do that, although Donald Trump is capable of anything these days. But I do want to note that what's happening here is the weaponization of anti-Semitism by pro-Israeli groups and pro-Israeli politicians who want to impose foreign policy orthodoxy upon the entire U.S. population, whether they're citizens or non-citizens. And what they want is that everyone is afraid for their liberty and afraid for their safety and afraid for even being able to stay in the country if they're not citizens, if they express political dissent against the U.S. government's policy on Israel. This is exactly the type of behavior that the drafters of the U.S. Constitution wanted to prevent when they included the First Amendment free speech clause.
And
so you have a stateless Palestinian who is essentially testing the very foundation of American First Amendment law.
Right, absolutely. And on that point, I mean, Mahmoud Khalil has become something of a poster child for those fighting for freedom of speech. So is there a bigger picture here? What does this mean for that fight?
Well, the bigger picture is that the Trump administration is clearly completely dismissing and disregarding free speech rights. And that is ironic because Republicans are often upset that the Constitution is not being respected when it comes to political speech by conservatives or by Republicans. And yet now they're in power and they're abusing their own authority to violate the very same Constitution they claim has been violated against them for partisan reasons. So the test here, even though this is an immigration case, but the collateral case, the First Amendment case, will impact students across the country. It will impact faculty. It will impact citizens. And I think this is why the courts are going to take it very seriously, because the courts understand that this is not simply a random or mundane immigration case. This is the executive branch trying to abuse its power to violate the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It doesn't matter who the actual person is, but that's ultimately what's at stake.
Really good to talk to you. Sahar Aziz, distinguished professor at Rutgers University Law School.
Thank you.